Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Good morning. Well, welcome, everybody, to the Mashpee Men's Club. We have a beautiful day outside. Thank you all for being indoors here for a short time. We always start the meeting with a salute to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I have never been to the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History. I've been meaning to do it for 20 years, and I have just never made it. So I'm so thrilled to be part of the men's club and actually get to do some of these things that I probably never would have done otherwise. So we're thrilled to have Bob Dwyer with us today. He is the president and executive director of the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History in Brewster. In October of 2022, the museum acquired the Thornton Burgess Society Greenbrier Nature Center in Sandwich, which I also have never been to, but hopefully I will. That is now part of his operation. Bob is in his 18th year at the museum, and prior to that, he was the director of the Center for Media Development at UMass Boston for 20 years. He holds a BS in Business Administration and Liberal Arts from Northeastern University and a master's in interactive technology in education from Harvard University. During his tenure at UMass, he won a number of video and design awards for both the university and center clients. Bob serves on a number of boards, including the Cape Cod Technology Council, Boy Scouts Council, Lighthouse Charter School, Chambers of Commerce, cable television committees, and historical committees. What do you do with your free time, Bob? Bob lives in Barnstable Village, and he has a getaway cottage in Eastham and moors his getaway boat at the Hyannis Yacht Club. Please help me welcome Bob Dwyer.
Use your hand, Ray. It's probably open. Would you like for me to take notes in front of you? Or beside you?
Well, I'll give you my notes. Thank you for having me here today. It's fun. My mind has, can you hear me? Do I need a microphone?
Use the mic.
Again, thank you for inviting me here. We're looking forward to your visit on the 25th.
You have to keep it fairly close.
Okay, how's that? Better?
Yep.
Everyone here? Okay. So the museum is going into its 70th year. We're in our 70th year. In December of this year, we'll be 70 years old. We have been really blessed because when I first got to the museum, which was in 2006, the museum had been closed for 6 months, and they didn't know if it was going to reopen. How many people actually have been to the Museum of Natural History? Great. How many folks have been to the Greenbrier Nature Center in Sandwich? So you know what it is that we do there. They're nature facilities. It really is geared toward families and kids. And one of the things that I thought was absolutely devastating was the fact that the museum actually could close. So in 2006, they brought me on, and I said I'd be there for about 3 years to really turn it around economically, financially, and I found that I loved the place, and so it's 18 years that I've been there, and it's just been a really great treat at that point in time. So this year, not only is the celebration of the 70th anniversary of the museum, it's the 150th celebration of the birth of Thornton W. Burgess. And down in Sandwich for the entire year, from January through December, we're having special events literally every single month. It started on January 14th, which was Thornton Burgess's birthday. We had a special cake and a presentation by the select board in Sandwich. And it ends in December with a reading of The Littlest Christmas Tree, which is one of Thornton W. Burgess's books. And Burgess wrote 170 books. He had also a column in the newspapers, and he wrote 15,000 newspaper columns. So ask about what people do in their free time. So we have been really very interested in the Burgess facility for a while, because they were going through the same kind of problems that we were going through back in 2006. And we thought we'd be able to join forces and hopefully turn that around financially as well. It's been a long haul, and it's had some bumps along the way, because we ran into 2008, 18 in the financial crises that we've had. We ran smack into 2020 with COVID, and we had to close down for a period of time. And literally that set us back probably 3 years in our planning. And so it's going forward, but it's taking some time. Right now, the museum is itself in Brewster is in really great financial condition. Sandwich, working on it, need a lot of help. Folks interested in volunteering, always interested in having volunteers down there, always interested in having members down there based on a variety of different skills. So we've gone through really a due diligence process with the former board there. It's, I don't know if folks know, but if you're a museum and you're a nonprofit, we don't actually own the artifacts that we have there. The state actually owns it. We're sort of keeping it in hopefully perpetuity. But if we close, the state decides what happens to it. So you have to go through the Attorney General's office, you have to go through the Supreme Judicial Court, and you have to get all of that approval before you can actually have an acquisition of another nonprofit. And that was one of the other areas that was slowing us down, because not only did we have 2020, but the courts actually closed down for about 3 or 4 years. You couldn't get a case heard. So in terms of where we're going right now in the next 5 years or so, is the museum for a number of years. I mean, it's been founded on the fact that we teach about plants and animals, and we've been doing that for 70 years. There's a field called biomimicry, and I became aware of it about 5 years ago. And if you think of biomimicry, you're thinking of imitation of life. So I was thinking camouflage, you know, the normal things we would think about. But that's really not it. Has anyone listened to a TED Talk by any chance on the internet? That was a go-to place for me. I went there and Googled biomimicry, got on a TED Talk. Does anyone know what biomimicry is? Got a chance?
I might.
I'm sorry?
I might, but I don't recognize the name.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. It's what we learn from plants and animals. So it's the natural extension of what we've been doing for 20 years. And so the grandfather kind of example of what biomimicry was about was in the 1940s, a Swiss scientist invented Velcro. And I can't tell you how many people think NASA invented Velcro, but it was a Swiss scientist. And what had happened is he had gone through the fields, and when he got with his dog and we got on the other side, he was starting to pull the burrs off of him and the fur, and he couldn't understand why it was holding on so tightly. So he put it under a microscope and found that each spoke on the burr had a little hook. And from that, he invented Velcro. So that was looking at what a plant could teach us in terms of coming up with a new invention. One of the other ones that's really promoted is the bullet train in Japan. When they first came up with the bullet train, it was obviously the fastest train in the world at that point in time. It would go through tunnels. As it would come out of the tunnels, it would cause a huge boom. I won't say it's a sonic boom, it was a huge boom. And it was breaking foundations, it was breaking windows, it was causing a tremendous amount of problems. So the Japanese government went to all of the scientists and said, we need you to come up with a solution. How do we reduce this? And one of the scientists happened to have been a birder. And in the back of his mind, he was remembering watching a kingfisher dive into the water. Didn't cause a ripple, just went right down. So from that, he started to figure out that it was the beak of the bird that dispersed that water and caused it to be able to go in without a major problem. He then elongated the front of the train. So when the train now goes through the tunnel, it disperses all of that air that goes through, eliminates the sonic boom, also increases the efficiency of the train, and has just solved a problem again, looking at nature. So here was a mechanical problem, needed a major solution, and it was someone not sitting at their computer figuring it out, but going out, had been someone out in the field bird watching and figured it out. So that field of biomimicry is actually started around 1994, 1995. And I talked to a person who is a futurist, and he said that literally for things to change, for something to actually make a difference, it takes about 20 years for it to get into place. So we're in that 20-year cycle at this point in time. We have been working on biomimicry for the past 5 or 6 years. It's been very lonely, and we have finally started to see a turnaround. And ironically, where the turnaround is coming about is that the books that are being sold to children are explaining what biomimicry is all about. So they're learning, for example, on a whale. The whale's fin has these tubulars on it, and they're starting to use the replica of that fin for the turbines that you see. Again, what it's doing is it's reducing the friction, and it's making them 40% more capacity in terms of being able to produce electricity and whatnot. So the idea of biomimicry is the ultimate, and I'm sure everyone has grandkids. We all know what STEM is. It's been around for probably, I don't know, 10 years at this point in time. And I have been fighting with places like Cape Cod Community College and other academic institutions to say that the idea of using a computer really isn't STEM. STEM, in fact, is science, technology, education, math. We throw art in there. And you can learn about that if you study nature. And what we did was to come up with two taglines saying that nature is the pathway to science and innovation, and nature is the pathway to science and invention. So that whole area has started to open up a different direction for the museum in Brewster to go in. Not only are we talking about what we find on Earth, but we're looking at space travel as well. So things like, we're all here from the 60s, right? We remember the 60s? Sort of, if you do. You weren't there, apparently. But mushrooms. Mushrooms are being researched at this point in time for planetary habitats. Also being looked at to bring food. So what you can do is bring the mushrooms into a habitat, you grow the food, so rather than putting on a payload of having to bring in items up through using rockets, you bring the seeds, you bring the fungi, you bring whatever is there. It's much more capable of being transported. The thing I found really interesting is that they're using it as the hallucinatory component for space travel. So all of the astronauts that are going to be going out there in space for some incredible period of time, by the use of these mushrooms, they're going to be able to tolerate that space travel a lot easier than what they've done in the past. So again, it's looking at nature and it's solving problems that we have in the 21st century. We're working with a museum in Oregon. It's the Oregon Museum of Industry and Technology. and we're starting to actually build a professional exhibit about biomimicry. And over the next couple of years, the Museum of Natural History in Brewster will be slowly but surely going in that direction. The world of Thornton Burgess keeps us in the world of what we've always done, which is teaching about nature and about animals. And Thornton Burgess had these incredible characters that were designed by or illustrated by Harrison Cady. And Harrison Cady was also a world-renowned artist in his own right. So we have sort of the best of both worlds of having the idea of using these illustrated characters that kids absolutely love, resurrecting Thornton Burgess's name because he's actually been forgotten in history, and I don't understand why. And slowly but surely, we're starting to make inroads of bringing him back. You know, you have Dr. Zeus; he's been around forever, but Thornton Burgess sort of just got lost. The Thornton Burgess story, frankly, is a Ken Burns documentary waiting to happen, because what he had done in terms of being an environmentalist and a conservationist and an author is absolutely phenomenal. And we are committed to getting his name back out there again. That's why we took on the initiative of saying we don't want that institution to close. Came very close to doing that, slowly but surely changing that around. So in Sandwich, we keep kind of like what we've been doing for a number of years with just the animals, the plants, the teaching about them. And then we segue as we go up into Brewster of going from that and then also teaching what we can learn from them. Science is going to be more of a major part of what we do in Brewster than it ever has before. And it's one of the areas that's absolutely needed. We were fortunate enough in 2019, these are all mixed blessings when I think about it. We were fortunate enough in 2019 to be gifted by Barnstable County with this Coastal Explorer science van. Has anyone seen it? It had gone to the schools. It's a van that is 25 years old and has traveled 15,000 miles because it's only on Cape Cod. It only goes to the schools on Cape Cod, and it only goes in the fall and in the spring. It's not in summertime. School is out, and in the wintertime, it's just not travel worthy in terms of the high winds and whatnot. It's a 31-foot van. There's curriculum that's in there. There's all kinds of artifacts and whatnot. So the county had been doing that for 20 some odd years. The person that they had as an educator took early retirement, and if anyone works for the state, they know that if you take an early retirement, your position goes away. So they had the van, and they could never staff it again. So the county started to reach out to Provincetown, to Falmouth, and other areas, and sort of asked them, would they be interested in taking over this van? Now it's an old van, but still 15,000 miles on it, but served a great purpose. They finally decided that we were the best place for it. We raised $30,000 in terms of funds and donations to upgrade it mechanically and to upgrade the inside of it. 2019 is when we got it. 2020 is when we were planning on launching it. It didn't get launched. Last week was the first time after all of these years that we actually got the van out, and it went into the Sandwich schools, and we hit about 180 kids in that one session. So it is now getting up, it's running, and it will also be going out into the schools the way it was always meant to be. So those are also the kinds of things that we're doing. So what we're hoping to do as we go forward is to not only use the van for biomimicry, but again, use the van for other kinds of purposes. We work with the Atlantic White Shark Conservancy. We actually helped them get started back in the day when they were trying to figure out how to become a nonprofit. And what we want to be able to do is use that van in the summertime with the Conservancy to go to different places where there have been shark sightings. So basically the national seashore for the most part, and have shark awareness programs for the visitors that are here. So what we're trying to do is reach out to the public in a variety of different ways. And that's pretty much kind of an overview of what it is that we do. If anyone has any questions, I'd love to answer. Yes, Russ?
What happened to the old Thornton Burgess house in Sandwich?
That's an interesting, they had actually rented that, it was owned by the town. And they rented it, the Thornton Burgess Society rented it for, I think it was $1 a year, some ridiculous amount. But the town decided that they really wanted to sell it. It was the price of it was $500,000, and there was at least another $500,000 worth of renovations that had to go into it. A private group bought it, and interestingly, they had a connection with Thornton Burgess Society in that they were volunteers at the Greenbrier Nature Center, and especially the Jam Kitchen. I should mention the Jam Kitchen if I haven't, I forgot about that. So it is now a B&B, and on July 25th, I think, we're having a major event, once upon a time, down at the Sandwich campus. The Burgess family is going to be there. I think they've got 10 people from across the country that are coming there. They're staying at the old museum that is now a B&B, and we're talking to Steve Zaros, and we're getting citations, and we're recognizing the family and all the good that Thornton Burgess did. So that's the story about the museum. Someone else had
I have two questions for you. The first is, with you bringing around the finances for these two museums and performing magic financially on those museums, I was wondering, is there any way that we can get you to Washington, D.C. to help out down there? So that was the first question. Something to
That's
keep
an
in
easy
mind.
answer.
The second question, you were talking about those hallucinatory mushrooms. And I was just wondering if there was any kind of a program we might be able to set up here at the Mashpee Men's Club, maybe for like a tasting contest or something, you know. There's a couple ideas, yeah.
I think you're hallucinating.
When I was at the university, the person that I reported to did his doctoral work at Harvard with Timothy Leary.
Whoa.
And I got to meet Tim Leary, and back then, this was, I don't know, it's about 40 years ago, I guess, at this point in time. And we were in the office, and Gunther, who was my boss, and Tim lit up. I had my scotch, and Tim started to relate some very interesting stories, but I remember one that was absolutely incredible because it's like 40 years ago. And he said, you know, the computer is going to be the LSD of the future. And how accurate is he at this, or was he at this point in time? I mean, we have the internet, which is, you know, to think of Peter Rabbit, talk about a rabbit hole. You start there looking for one thing and you go, God knows goes where. The things of Facebook and the addiction that we were finding with kids and getting into that technology is rather incredible. When I was studying at Harvard, it was a very, very small program. There were only 15 of us in there, and it was dealing with interactive technology. And my advisor was the founder of Sesame Street, and I thought I was going to flunk out of that place so fast because I had said to him, his name was Dr. Jerry Lesser, and I said to him, Jerry, you know, I understand the hit of Sesame Street, but I personally have a problem with it in terms of all of the fast stuff that keeps happening, and how do we know, how does that affect the attention span down the road of the kids? And I think half the problems that we're seeing right now is that they don't have the patience to read a book. They don't have the patience to watch a long movie. If it's not immediate, if it's not flashing, if it's not colorful and not going all over the place, we've sort of lost them. And that's one of the other things that we bring into what it is that we're doing with the kids. I mean, they're not dealing with computers with us. They're just not. And it's a difficult sell for some people, but we've got to get back to people paying attention to nature, smelling. We have a program called forest bathing, and when it was first proposed to me, I said, forest bathing? You know, my mind was going on. I don't know. And then it struck me. I said, I think I've heard about this in terms of being in Japan. And I said, is this where they go out and they, for lack of a better term, they smell the roses? And that's exactly what it is. They go out there. They have basically a mentor who, in this particular case, happens to have her PhD in therapy, and it's to get people to sort of calm down, to not be so hyper, not be so active, and that has become one of our most popular programs, to the point that we're now teaching other people how to do it in other organizations. So yeah,
Very
no, I'm not
interesting.
going to Washington.
Does this cause you, as you design things in your museum, to accommodate a shorter attention span?
Yeah, because a lot of what we're doing, especially when we're dealing with the space, is talking about a problem. You're going to a different planet. What do you need to bring with you? What do you need to think about? How are you going to get there? What are you going to build as a habitat? How is that going to? How long is it going to take you to get there? So it is team building. It is critical and creative thinking, and it is taking your time and looking at where the pitfalls might be and how to interact with other kids. How to not just go off on your own someplace with the damn cell phone that you've got. You know, you're texting while people are talking to you. None of that is there. So yeah, I think we do that. Yeah. Yes.
You overlooked, I think, the most important story of people learning from nature. I'm from Dayton, Ohio, which is home to the Wright brothers. And of course, as we all know, they invented the first airplane. Dayton proudly calls itself first in flight.
Right.
How did they invent the first airplane? They studied birds.
Birds. Yeah.
Birds. They studied the wings of birds and how birds fly. I mean, this is perhaps the most important story of man learning from nature.
Well, I'll up you one, because if you go in history, it's actually Da Vinci who had
Well, I mean,
those
there might have been people
schematics
before the Wright brothers.
of the birds, of the wings, of how to fly. So that is exactly what we're talking about. It's how do you pay attention to nature to solve a problem. And there are actually now biomimicry challenges, and they're being paid for by different. I think it's Anderson Carpeting or Flooring or something like that. It's a very huge group, and they fund a biomimicry challenge where they go out and literally across the world, people come up with ideas, and those ideas are then assessed and evaluated. And if you win, you can get like $100,000 to start to put your idea into a prototype, and then figure out how to go from there. So it's all over the place. The idea of spiders, for example, spider webs you know, much stronger than steel in terms of the makeup and looking at them for bridges. So, yeah, I mean, the Wright brothers, Da Vinci, all of that, it's
say
thinking
Leonardo
about
da
it.
Vinci also studied the birds.
I'm sorry?
Leonardo da Vinci?
Yes,
I don't doubt that there were predecessors, but he didn't invent the airplane. The Wright brothers invented.
someone
I
else
mean, the
did.
birds have been studied.
Didn't
I'm
someone
sure.
else say it's not you guys? I'm trying to remember.
Yeah, but my point is, I don't doubt that there were people before the Wright brothers who
Oh, yeah,
studied birds,
yeah,
of course.
yeah.
But they were the ones who actually put it into
Yeah.
action.
If you look at the old films, the guy in the bicycle with the with the wings that flew for 10 feet or something like that. I mean, you know, everybody was doing it, but the whole point is they were studying the birds, they were
Correct.
studying the wings, and that's how they figured out how to actually make it work and make it fly. Yeah, totally. Yes.
When you talked about the fungi and the idea of bringing them as food, well, transporting spores is of course a great idea. Have they considered the transport of manure to get the fungi to grow on
I don't
something?
know. I don't know. I'll ask. You know, interestingly, it's my next door neighbor. This is an aside. It's not answering your question, but it was that whole
Yeah.
planetary habitat thing. My next door's neighbor's daughter is a colonel in the Air Force in combat. She just this past Saturday got her master's degree from the Sloan School at MIT, and she works for a company that is researching how to create habitat for planetary exploration. You know, I mean, these things that folks are doing and how they're making these connections, and I go back also in thinking of the graduate program. I had one guy who just simply said, knowledge, learning, is the ability to make connections, and that's exactly what we're talking about, of making connections with nature to solve some kind of problem. So I think, yeah, we are doing it's taking your time to be able to actually do that. I think that's critical.
If I may throw a little more into this, because I'm a biologist. So
Okay, great. I'm not, so.
into it. And the bird thing and the flight, when you try to mimic nature, you have to figure out what to mimic.
Mhm.
Because the other people that worked on this didn't succeed. They had
Exactly.
to look at the right kind of birds
Exactly.
that went like this without flapping.
Exactly. Exactly.
And there are so many things. Our behavior is totally, you can relate in our behavior, animal behavior, back and forth. We can study, you know, the whole thing about evolution and Darwinism, and then we talk about crude industrial Darwinism, and you know, can't justify all of that, and so forth. You know, in nature, predators do well just so far, then the food disappears. We can learn a whole lot by mimicking the success and failure of species and things like that. It's endless. We're trying to figure out how to do chemical photosynthesis.
Exactly. I mean, you know, oysters. We've got a couple of examples right here. I think there's one in Falmouth. I know there's one in Orleans. An oyster can cleanse 50 gallons of water a day. So they have these oyster beds out there. One of the most popular portions of the exhibit, and unfortunately you guys won't see it because we had to take it down because it's our 70th anniversary, and in that particular case we were showing the kind of evolution of the museum, of going from a tent to smaller building to where we are now. But this whole idea of chemicals that are in hair coloring, and some company has invented the, the way of doing hair color for women that does not involve chemicals. And I cannot tell you how many women I see reading that particular thing. It's absolutely amazing. It was sort of a throwaway for us. I mean, we knew it had happened, but we had no idea that, people were actually, and it's the women that were thinking about it. They're very interested in that for a lot of different reasons. So there's just a million different ways of looking at nature and solving problems.
Can I throw one last one in?
Absolutely.
Many years ago,
You're gonna be a volunteer,
I took an entomology course many years. You wouldn't believe how long. And what the professor told us about aerodynamics, he said the aerodynamics people had demonstrated that bumblebees couldn't fly because their center of gravity relative to where their wings were put didn't work. But so hey, well, they didn't tell the bumblebees this, fortunately. But then when somebody observed how the bumblebees flew, they flew more or less upright. So they didn't fly like this. They held their bodies like this. It made all the difference. They decided they could fly.
Yeah. Good thing. Good.
Yeah. Imagine.
Yes.
I've got 4 or 5-year-old grandchildren. How appropriate would they fit into the Bruce?
Totally. At that age, for sure. We have a kids summer program that ranges from age 3. Basically, they have to be toilet trained, up to 15, and so it's age appropriate as it goes up. But there's something. I mean, we really are family and kid oriented in that fashion. So even when I mentioned the fact that biomimicry now is finding its way through kids' books, that's very important. We use those kids' books to train our docents as well. So once you've got that group, you've got them. Thornton Burgess absolutely knew that the way to get to mom, dad, and grandparents were the kids, and that's what all of his stories, Peter Rabbit and Reddy Fox and all the rest of them. So it's all very age appropriate, and a lot of hands-on stuff too.
I came in late, so correct me, you probably brought it up, but Last Child in the Woods, the book,
Yeah.
Really makes a great case for
Yeah.
getting them outside and involved.
Yeah, totally. We tried to. I'm drawing a blank on the author. We tried to get him
I
over
can't
there.
remember it either.
He costs a fortune.
Yeah.
He costs a fortune. But that whole model is actually what it is that we do. I should mention I brought up the jam kitchen, and I forgot at Burgess. So at Thornton Burgess, there's sort of an identity crisis, because some people know it as the Thornton Burgess Society. Some people know it as the Green Meadow Greenbrier Nature Center, and some people know it as the Jam Kitchen. And if you say Jam Kitchen to the Greenbrier Nature Center, people no clue. The Jam Kitchen has its own following. It's absolutely amazing where people are coming from, including overseas when they come here. They make sure they come to that Jam Kitchen. It was built in 1903, and as far as we know, it is the oldest continuously running jam kitchen in the country, and it's sort of a museum piece in its own right. And one of the issues that sort of slowed us down as well is, I think it's 2018. The government changed its rules about food manufacturing, and so for us to make jam that we could distribute in some fashion or sell it over the internet, we would have to actually destroy the this 1903 jam kitchen and put in a jam kitchen that follows all the rules and regulations of the federal government at this point in time. Somehow or another, they associated that with Homeland Security, and I think it might have to do with that's not the only thing that equated with Homeland Security. We had a problem with putting in a heater in one of our rooms because it didn't have enough insulation. The thing was built like in 1960, was never so, and all we wanted to do is have another couple of weeks, in the fall or a couple of weeks in the spring, and the town said, "Oh, no, you can't do that." And I said, "Why?" I said, "Well, because it'll go up and it'll destroy the ozone." I said, "Okay, fine, keep the fire." So we have a lot of rules and regulations with things that we do.
And you can't get any exceptions to these?
No.
So how does the jam kitchen work?
We can sell it in a mercantile. So it's and we can sell it at a farmer's market. Those two things are okay. But to distribute it at, Shaw's or something, we couldn't do that.
You get USDA approval or something like that?
Yeah, it's crazy. So what we did is we have some favored recipes. We got a company up in Vermont, and they follow that recipe. They have all of the permits. So we have two kinds of levels. One that we sell from the kitchen in the mercantile, and one that we sell in the mercantile but can also sell on the internet. So if people want, the special blueberry or whatever, we can do that. And if we wanted to, we could get into more distribution, but it's not really something that we're interested in. Should say other things that I'm thinking about in terms of draws. You had me thinking. One of the in Brewster, we have a rather incredible aquarium as well. And it is following the habitat that we find on Cape Cod. So it's fresh water, it's brackish water, and it's salt water. And we have species of each kind down there. So the exhibit is called One Cape, Many Waters. So we show people what it is that if you come to the museum first, and then you take a hike out into the woods or go on a program called Mudflat Mania, you reinforce when you go outside of what you saw in the museum. If you manage to come and the tour is leaving, so you go on the tour first, when you come back to the museum, we reinforce what it is that you saw on the outside. 6 years ago, I think we put in a butterfly house. And that's an incredibly popular thing as well. So it is a place where kids go, they're awed, they can interact with the butterflies. Actually have, this was Cape Cod Magazine, Cape Cod Life, did a feature story on the 70th birthday. This is it. I asked them to give me copies of it without all the ads because I'm going to use it to raise money, not in Washington, but every place else. But one of the first things that we have in here is this little girl, and you can't see it, but there's a butterfly right on top of her head. So they get to go in there, they actually get to feed the butterflies, so they understand how it works. They watch the caterpillars, the chrysalis, they can see what's going on. And it just, when you get them at that age, you've got them. You absolutely have them, and that's exactly what we're trying to do. We want them to be able to have not only very fond memories of their visits on Cape Cod, or if they're living here, but we want them to understand there are things that they can do in their own backyard, and to bring those lessons home.
I wonder if you could maybe give us a 2-minute walk through your museum. I envisioned it as a building you walk in. I've never been there.
Uh-huh.
I envisioned it as you walk in and there's a giant dinosaur. What you would.
So, has my staff paid you to come up with that question? Because they will not let me have a dinosaur. And I want a dinosaur. There are no dinosaurs, I have been told, on Cape Cod. I'm convinced they're in the water someplace out there. So no, you won't find a dinosaur. What you will do when you come in is pass by a Native American exhibit that talks about the first people of the light, the Wampanoags, and we did that in collaboration with the tribe. And also with Plymouth Patuxet is that what they call now? Plymouth Patuxet? Used to be Plymouth Plantation.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, my politically correct stuff gets lost. So it gives folks an idea of how long that they've been here, what it is that they've done. We have in I'm going to go outside the museum for a second. If you go into the back of our museum, going down to Cape Cod Bay, there's an area called Wings Island. Has anyone read Bill Martin's book, Cape Cod?
Yeah.
I think it was. Do you remember Jack's Island? That was the whole thing everybody was fighting about. One group wanted to save it to as a sanctuary. Other group wanted to put in high-rise hotels and whatnot. Well, Wings Island is Jack's Island, and I found that out in a very weird way as I was looking out. We have this great vista in this place called the Mashpee room, and it was a very snowy day. It was blowing, and the snow was actually going horizontal. Trying to see it going out there, and I was looking over. They had a cup of coffee. My mind was wandering. I just kept looking at it and said, I wondered, because I had read the book and I had read it recently, and so I had the opportunity. The Harvard Club invited Bill Martin down to talk in one of the restaurants, and I went up, introduced myself, and he said, and I said, I got a stupid question for you. And he just looked at me. He said, "Yeah, it's Jack's Island. It's Jack's Island." He knew exactly what it was that I was talking about. So that is part of the story. 8,000 years of life on our little area, and that's part of the Wampanoag story. Then we talk about there's reliefs of showing the ice melting over 20, 30, 40,000 year periods to where we have what it is now. There's a tusk, mammoth tusk, and the mammoth tusk did not come from Cape Cod. It actually came from Alaska by someone was on the board, I guess, number way before I was here, probably about 50 some odd years ago. But he sent it because we did have mastodons here. And we have a tooth, and the tooth was found when they dug the canal. So that's there. We have a relief that shows the overall habitat of Cape Cod, the one Cape, the many waters. So again, salt, brackish, fresh. We go into an area called Science Rocks, and that used to be the library. And when I first got there, it's a good sized room. And when I first got there, it was the most underutilized room you could imagine. And people would walk in and because of the library, so I can't talk. I was like, this is stupid. This is stupid. So we changed it. I mean, it served its purpose 40 some odd years ago, before the libraries were around and whatnot, but no longer served its purpose. Now it's probably the most active, loudest room that we have. All kinds of hands-on information and things that the kids can use about how to think like a scientist. We ask questions. We have, museums started through basically rich folks that had curios in their houses. They found skeletons and whatnot. And when they started to retire, die, whatever, they started to give them off to other places, and museums became this. So that's what we're showing. That's where the museum started, these dead things. But now we're showing you need to think about these live things. We built the front end in that room, the front end of a bullet train that I described with the kingfisher thing, and describe have a little kingfisher up there so they understand that that's how this train now actually functions. The other room is the Mashpee room that overlooks the bay. We have a lot of hands-on information on that, and it's about space travel. We have observation beehive, and if you recall, the Webb telescope that went up Christmas Day in 22, I think, it was held off for a period of time. If you looked at the models of the Webb telescope and how they put that into the payload, how they folded it up, it's basically a honeycomb. It was designed after what bees create. So we were showing, making that comparison of here's space, here's a honeycomb, and this is how they made this work. Downstairs is the aquarium, also an area of preserved birds that was owned by a private party and a private individual in Osterville, and it shows literally everything that is kind of natural on Cape Cod indigenous, and it also shows you the visitors that come through. They're migrating, but you see them on Cape Cod in some fashion or another. And then there's the aquarium, and the aquarium is pretty lengthy. Outside there's gardens, rain gardens, natural plant gardens that are used in association with the butterfly house, and you can go for a walk down to Wings Island. You can do a guided tour, and they explain everything that's happening. There's where the kinds of plants that are going, the kinds of birds that are out there, the kinds of plants, and also some, depending on people's interest, the indigenous, the actual habitat, the lives that were out in Wings Island. Wings Island gets flooded, so you can't really get there unless it's dead low tide. But it did have life out there for 8,000, going back over 8,000 years. There's another 80 acres behind us that you can walk through and hike. So it's an area that you can just take your time and get a sense of little pieces of Cape Cod. We try and keep it like visiting your grandparents. There's the screen doors and the flip flop kind of thing. Slowly but surely, getting a little bit away from that with the science stuff, but I think we need to.
What kind of a staff do you have? How much of this have you done, and how much has your staff done?
My staff does everything. That's why I get to come.
How big a staff do you have? What kind
We
of
have-
people do you have?
We have 11 staff people, full-time equivalency. So there's some time sharing in some of them. They have all different skills. So for example, I need someone that can get do the technology, get our website up, get our Facebooks out, get the constant contacts, and I have Kate. Her background happens to be an underwater archaeologist, but she's amazing with the technology. We have an aquarist that not only does the aquarium, but she does the butterfly and the bees. So everyone is wearing like 3 or 4 different hats. We have 230 volunteers now. So when you guys were talking about your picnic out here, every year at the kickoff, welcoming people back, I do the cooking for the volunteers that are coming in. I usually get about 80 or 90 volunteers that show up, because it's a little bit too early for some of the volunteers who haven't left their second homes to come to Cape Cod. They are retired biologists, they're retired neuroscientists, they're HVAC people, they're everything. So my job, one of my jobs, is to walk around, talk to them, ask them what they did in the real world, and figure out how they could help me in my world. So it's one of those things. We have a tremendous staff.
When we visit there as a group, do we go on a tour or is everybody on their own?
That depends. I'll talk to Russ, and it depends on how many folks you have, and we'll figure that out. And I'm definitely going to try and be there. So it's a question of, if it's a rainy day, I don't know what to tell you, because on a rainy day I could have over 1,000 people show up in that place. When I first got there, if it was a beach day, if we had 30 to 40 people come through, that was a lot. On a beach day now, we have 300 people coming through. On a rainy day, it goes from 900. The most we've had that we counted was 1,300 at one point in time. So it's an active, it's an active place. We get about 60,000 people that go through the museum. The bulk of them from June, obviously, to the end of August. June, there's an awful lot of school trips, kids coming through, and your beginning of the day is very hectic. Your end of the day, it sort of slides off. You're going to be there June 25th.
Yes.
I don't know if Kids Summer is in session. I think it might be. So we have basically about 6 or 8 classes of kids that will be wandering around as well. And again, ages 3 to 15. So it's an active place. So depending on how many folks you got, we'll figure out how to make it a fun time for you.
How far do the kids come from? Do they come from off Cape?
But yeah, all over. I mean, we all have. I'm assuming you all have grandkids, and they're not here. We have them for the summer, and or a short period of time in the summer. So grandma, granddad will bring them to the museum. The parents are vacationing down here. We have them coming from Mexico, Canada, California, Japan. So when they come here to visit, they've gotten to know what the Cape Cod Museum of Natural History is about. They love the programs and they keep coming. The fun part about what happens is, again, we get them from age 3. They go into this age group of 15, and then they're sort of off because there's other things that are going on in their lives. They're graduating from high school and whatnot. They keep coming back. I had one of my favorite stories is I had this girl who we had her since she was 3, and she went through the whole thing of right up to the junior naturalist, and then she became a staff member for us teaching in the summer because she was grounded in all of this. And then she went on to law school, and she graduated from law school. And then she said, I'll see you next summer. I said, no, you won't. No, you won't. You are going to do whatever it is that lawyers do when they graduate with a law firm. We'll see you when you have your own kids. That's it. Bye. And that's what we do. They come back. We have kids that we won't see for 5 or 6 years, and then suddenly they're there and they have their own kids and whatnot, and the cycle starts all over again.
And what about official school trips?
That happens basically right now. We're in the middle of the school trips.
How far away did those schools?
New York.
Really?
Yeah, New York, Connecticut, and whatnot. It's just starting to come up again because, again, COVID absolutely killed everyone. One of the things with COVID, we literally lost 50% of our membership. Got it back in spades like 2 years later, but it was a slow increment of getting it. COVID just did such a job in so many folks. Any other questions?
Wonderful, Bob. Thank
Thank
you
you.
so much.
Thank you for
Thank
inviting me.